It's been the subject of legal action for years, and this week the Saskatchewan government finally apologized to students who attended the Isle of Cross residential school. Premier Moe also agreed to pay them and their families $40 million in restitution. And speaking of money, the lowest earners in Saskatchewan are getting a small boost. Minimum wage went up yesterday from $15 per hour to $15.35. Plus, the Saskatchewan NDP is gathering tomorrow in Saskatoon for its 86th annual convention, and to weigh in on all of that, we are once again joined by two very good friends of the 306. Jack Saddleback and Dale Richardson make up our public affairs panel. Jack's a professional speaker in Saskatoon. Dale is principal at Earnscliffe Strategies in Regina, and we are thrilled to have them back, both live for our first gathering since the summer break. Good afternoon, Dale.
Good afternoon.
And hello, Jack.
Hey, good afternoon.
I'd love to just talk about our summers, but you know, the news doesn't wait, and we brought you in to talk about all the public affairs going on in the province. And let's start with that Premier's apology and the promise of compensation for Saskatchewan's role in the Isle of Cross residential school. Jack, what do you make of that?
Well, this has, as we've heard, has been a long time coming, and folks may wonder why it was a long time coming. And it's due to the classification of this particular residential school, which kind of fell off the parameters of the federal government as well as the provincial government. So the history around that is one of the reasons why it just didn't seem to fall within that air of the residential school apologies. So the look at it all and the reassessment of it, I think, was very important, and it's a long time coming. And I'm really glad that they actually did this right before the National Truth and Reconciliation Day. It's symbolic and huge to be able to address some of the harms that this particular residential school, as well as all of the residential school systems, have done to Indigenous community members.
Dale, any general thoughts?
Well, I thought it was saying that it was a great day is not the best way to put it, but I mean, I think I was really glad to see it happen. I mean, of course, I think I think we in this province, I think we could probably have a good conversation about whether September 30th should be a stat holiday. I think what's even better is actually doing things that advance reconciliation in this province, and I think what the Premier did. And the government did on Monday was a fantastic step in the right direction. And to just build on Jack's point, this school I think closed more than 50 years ago, and I think I read that it started in the 1820s or very like in the a long time ago, maybe like late 1800s. So, this goes back a long time, but I think that doing this, doing other kinds of acts, different types of reconciliation acts, I think it is absolutely the right thing to do, and I was happy to see it.
Well, obviously, as Jack mentioned, that this was the subject of legal action for years. Why do you think it took so long to reach this agreement and finally publicly acknowledge it?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't really understand much of this. I would suspect it's because of the large number, sadly, because of the large number of people involved and the survivors and the people affected by this school and what happened there. These kinds of lawsuits, I'm not sure if this is a class action lawsuit, but I mean, it's when there's a lot of people involved, it's very complicated. So, and I think, Jack, you might know this, or maybe somebody else knows, probably because it spanned, different governments, different, there was an NDP government that presumably started to work on this at some point. Then it transitioned to the Saskatchewan Party people, and I think things like this just take a long time for a number of reasons. But yeah, as I said, I'm glad that it seems to have finalized or will be soon. Yeah,
Jack, and I don't want to get too much in the process of all of this kind of stuff, but does that make sense to you to do these hand in hand, to consult with everybody, to come with the apology and the compensation at the same time, or is an apology something that should have happened a long time ago?
It certainly is by community. The process itself needs to be flexible, and I'm really glad that over the years they've been able to have these conversations, and then come to a point where yes, there needs to be the apology as well as compensation and the transparency about the processes that have gone into this and the reasons why this particular school, unfortunately, was kind of lost between some of these informational cracks over the years, where the classification itself kind of left it off the radar of the larger federal government. And then, luckily enough, the survivors of this particular school had a lot of support within the community to continue pushing and be recognized as one of the residential schools within this larger harmful system.
Jack, more broadly speaking, how do you think the province is doing in terms of implementing the Commissioner's call to actions on reconciliation?
I mean, there's certainly some ebbs and flows when it comes to reconciliation efforts. Compensation, like we've seen on Monday, especially for historic harms that are hopefully going to be able to help put resources in communities that have suffered from these systemic harms and intergenerational traumas that we've seen. That's one side of things. The other aspect of reconciliation that we are starting to step into is treaty rights around land use, around the sale of crown lands, and what we're starting to see within our province a little bit more is that sale of those sacred crown lands, which incorporate treaty rights and the duty to consult with Indigenous nations. So when looking at reconciliation from those types of viewpoints, we're seeing good and we're seeing not so good. So if I could give it any sort of grade point right now, I think we're sitting about a C. We could always do better.
It's definitely something we'll talk about on this panel in the weeks and months to come for sure. Let's move on to something yesterday that I think gets people's attention just within a headline, right? Saskatchewan's minimum wage went up 35 cents to $15.35 an hour. It's still the second lowest minimum wage in Canada. Alberta has the lowest. Dale, how do you feel about this increase?
I think it's good. The thing about the minimum wage increase, and you're right, I think it's every quarter it goes up, or I'm not sure the cadence
I'm not
of
sure
when it
the
goes
cadence
up.
Either,
but
yeah. Seems like every few years.
Yeah, the thing about it that I always am a little perplexed in terms of how much coverage it gets is, one, there's a very small percentage of people working in Saskatchewan that only make minimum wage. So that's one thing. The second thing is people, I don't know, and maybe this is just me and how I think about it in my head, is that people maybe see these stories and they think people have to only get paid this minimum wage, which of course isn't the case. I mean, there are certainly some lower income workers that get paid above minimum wage. But just thinking back to when I had a consulting business and I either worked with employees that I had or with contractors, I paid them what I could afford. And that was a lot more than the minimum wage. But I paid them that amount because that's what I could afford. That's what my business, based on the revenue that I had, I could pay them $35, $40 an hour or more. And I think that's my main takeaway here is that if small businesses can afford to pay more than minimum wage, particularly, I think a living wage would be great for people living in this province, then that's fantastic. So I think it's a small increase, but it's good.
Thanks to our producer Shloke Talati here, who says 3% of total employees in Saskatchewan earn minimum wage in 2018.
That's the number that I researched as well. So great,
Jack. Any general thoughts first?
General thoughts is I agree. It's nice that things have gone up. Certainly, I too just agree with Dale here that it would be great to have a livable wage, which I think the numbers that have been provided is within Saskatoon, that would be $18.50 an hour. In Regina, it is $18.05 an hour. So that within itself is a living wage. I'm an optimistic guy. can I say? But I would love to be able to see more of a thriving wage, which would, yes, include being able to comfortably cover basic necessities, but also being able to actually save in a larger chunk for those future endeavors, houses, retirement, so on and so forth. But also just having a little bit of leisure room, because you know what, it's great to be able to pay things off, but you also want to be able to actually experience life, go out there, have vacations with your family and friends, and be able to do things such as live.
Jack, let's continue talking about that, and I'll come back to you, Dale, as well, on this idea of a living wage. Some employers do that, right? That's what they consider to be a minimum wage. Jack, I want to ask you, the NDP has talked about this a lot. Do you think an NDP government would actually implement a living wage, considering we don't really see it widely spread through Western society?
Yeah, you see, that's a challenge within itself, because we do have to look at the aspects of the economic side of things, and being able to get larger societal or community buy-in for something around livable wage. We can see that capitalism itself is geared to be able to make as much profit as possible for the shareholders, which I get. Folks are definitely business folks, and you want to be able to get that dime. But at the same time, if we do not have a workforce that is happy, that is healthy, that is able to give their all within this aspect of feeling good at work, that's where productivity definitely goes down. When it comes to the NDP being able to implement that, that's, I think, going to be the larger conversation, is how to be able to get community buy-in, how to be able to look at the impacts and multifaceted impacts that we're seeing within being able to get to a point of a healthy economy, to be able to then give that thrivable, livable wage. But anything's possible, and we've certainly seen it in other countries as well.
Dale, any thoughts just on living wage? And I say this not to be critical or anything, but I don't see the Saskatchewan government being the first province in Canada to lead the way on that. What are your thoughts just on the idea of a living wage instead of a minimum wage?
I think it's a great idea in theory, and best implemented by the businesses on their own, because of the reasons that I said before. If it's imposed on a small business where they have a certain amount of revenue coming in, very, very small profit margins, for the government to impose upon them that you must pay these employees this amount. The chambers of commerce around the province, the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, groups like that, they are going to be very, very angry. So I don't see that going too well. There's a cafe in Saskatoon that I went to recently. Jack, you might know it. And Peter, your colleagues did a great story about it, which I saw on TikTok. And this cafe, they say no tips.
Right.
And because we're not asking for tips, we are going to pay our employees a living wage, which I thought that was really cool. And I suspect that customers are really happy to go into that place.
Sure.
And not have the little square machine the iPad flipped around on them, where you feel very uncomfortable. How much should I be tipping here? Or should I even be tipping? And I think at places like that, their prices are probably a little bit more, for coffee and donuts or pastries, but I think that is the way to go on these kinds of things.
Right. And I mean, it seems like a win-win for everybody, but again, that's one business out of hundreds of thousands, and we are just kind of leaving it to the private sector to decide whether they're going to do that, which seems like they aren't, right?
That's the free market, man. I mean, Jack brought up capitalism. We can get into that if we really want to. I don't know. But
before we move on, I do want to ask you, Dale,
Sure.
What do you make of the fact that Saskatchewan and Alberta are still the lowest minimum wage provinces in the country? And I say that with providing the information that, look, Nunavut's the highest. A variety of reasons for that, right?
Yeah.
They would need it to attract people. It is more remote. Ontario is at $17.60. Obviously, that's when you start factoring in BC and Ontario, both close to $18 price of living, things like that. But what sense does it make that Saskatchewan and Alberta would be consistently the lowest?
I'm not an economist, so
fair. I know, it's a tough question. Yeah.
Pulling numbers out of my behind, or just things that I'm thinking about here. I would just wager a guess that it has to do with generally in this province a pretty low cost of living. Places like Ontario, one of the most expensive places to live. I mean, in Toronto in particular. I'd imagine Vancouver's has a pretty high minimum wage, or I'm not sure you said this.
Yeah,
Peter,
BC's $17.85.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, that makes sense to me, just off the top of my head, that the most expensive places in Canada, you need a little bit more money to live there or to even function. I would suspect there's probably something to that. Saskatchewan's economy is more trade exposed, where we export things, not quite as service focused necessarily, and I suspect that probably fits into as well why there's a pretty low percentage of people that only make the minimum wage in this province, because people are working they work in jobs where they get paid a decent amount to begin with.
Jack, any final thoughts? Or you want to move on to the NDP convention that's happening tomorrow?
Well, we were going to talk about capitalism, so I don't think we necessarily have a lot of time for that.
Well, let's talk about the Saskatchewan NDP gathering in Saskatoon for 3 days for its annual convention. Jack, what do you think the party is going to try to accomplish here?
I'm really curious on exactly the conversations that will be happening at this convention. As we've seen, the political landscape on a national level has changed for the NDP, and the messaging itself that happens here within the province certainly needs a little bit of a pivot to be able to address some of these. Now what we see are new challenges in our landscape. We don't necessarily have the same partnership with our friends down south. And that needs to be heavily considered when it comes to our economy, when it comes to the way we speak about how social programming and other things that affect the budgetary aspects of our province look like. And then second to that, also, I think it would be imperative of the NDP to really start to get the boots on the ground when it comes to our rural community members and northern community members, because quite often it's a little bit easier to gather in metropolitan areas or urban areas such as Saskatoon, and that's great. But we do need to reach out just a little bit more and hear about some of the concerns that are taking place, such as for farmers and the amount that they're being hit by these trade wars. And then further to that, what does healthcare look like as we're trying to balance all of these, juggling things in the air right now? So it's going to be fascinating to see what these conversations will look like, because I know that there are differing opinions within how these conversations should go forward.
Before I come back to Dale, Jack, just how do you think the NDP is doing so far in holding the government to account? And is there something out, or is there more you'd like to see them doing?
I mean, I'm a very optimistic individual. I think Carla is certainly finding her footing when it comes to the tone and messaging moving forward. And the new MLAs that are in these spots are certainly getting experience and finding their voice as well. So I think as the team starts to get a little bit more under their belt, we're going to see, as we move into the fall season and the public starts to, wake back up from that summer vacation and brushing off the beach sand, that they will start to pay a little bit more attention to what's going on within the legislative building. But we're just going to have to wait and see after this convention how that tone is going to shift in whichever way going forward.
Dale, I want to ask you specifically about that, just because, look, we have the same problem in media where I constantly wish we would go quality over quantity, right? Mm-hmm. This is just the way life is. The news is nonstop and coming at us from all angles. The NDP, they are constantly having pressers and sending out news releases on everything from healthcare, hospital overcrowding, affordability issues in government procurement, all sorts of things. They're very, very active. Is the opposition doing a good job from their perspective of highlighting these things, or do you think they've been effective with this?
I think they have been, to the point where I think the folks on the Sask Party, on the government side of things, they've taken note of it. And I think, the last month and leading up to session and in the next couple of weeks, the Sask Party, they are going to be doing, hopefully trying to match what the NDP has been doing. The only concern about the NDP that I was talking to somebody about this earlier is that you're right, they are doing so much in terms of media. They are talking about every issue, everything that pops up. They're trying to, as I would say, punch the government in the face on it. But if you talk about everything think that sometimes you risk talking about nothing at the same time. So I don't know if they're, as we get closer to the next election in 2028, that they try to narrow it down, or they just do, kind of the full court press type of thing. So I think that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, no, this weekend, just for their convention, I think, speaking of 2028, I think that's what this is about. The NDP, they need to keep building towards that election. Because that's the ball game for them. If they don't make advances in the next election, they need to form government or bust, basically.
Dale, I got a minute, but I did want to get a bit of behind the scenes look at conventions in general. Are these things to build up for the next election, or are they potentially troubles, or could they create trouble if there's divisions within and people kind of?
In my notes, Peter. It's a great thing to say.
What happens at conventions?
Yeah, I suspect that this version of the NDP, based on their leadership and the staff that are running things, I suspect they are working very hard behind the scenes and will be this weekend to make sure that nothing stupid happens, particularly when it comes to policy. The NDP in this province have suffered greatly in the past from weird policy initiatives that come up on the floor, during these conventions. So they will be very smart to not have any of those things come up. But in general, 2 nights, 3 days, that's a very long weekend. And I'm glad I'm not going to it. Sask Party conventions are like a day, and that is, in the past, has been too much for me. So good luck to the NDP members that are there. It's a long weekend.
Jack, Dale, it's so great to have you both back.
Thank you, Peter. Great to see you.
Thanks so much.